Merry meet. Annie here. Welcome back to Tarot Together and our continuation of taking a look at the symbols on the High Priestess card. Let's look at the scroll she's holding in her right hand and the gnosis. Waite refers to it very specifically as divine law and the gnosis. Gnosis is the experience of spirit through enlightenment or insight. It's the knowledge of spiritual mysteries. It's not being told something is, interestingly. Something's written on that scroll. But he refers to it as law. Well, that might be written down. And gnosis, but gnosis is about firsthand experiencing of something. There'll be some other things I mentioned a little bit further in this discussion that help me understand, well, what's gnosis got to do with written down as divine law or written in that scroll that she is holding? It all fell into place for me. I hope it will for you. Gnosis is the knowledge of spiritual mysteries, and that's so much who she is. This is interesting. The goal of Gnosis, this knowledge, is salvation. Not something that always resonates with those of us who don't follow a spiritual path that includes the concept of salvation. But salvation, in the broader sense, is about achieving a place of wholeness. For the Christian, it could be unity with God once salvation is attained. For those of us who don't relate to that, it can be coming to a place of such personal wholeness that we are indeed the best that we can be of ourself. It's the intuitive understanding of greater truths, of spiritual truths. Waite tells us that not only is it divine law and the gnosis, but that it's partly covered by her clothing to show that some things are implied and some things spoken. Partly covered by her mantle to show that some things are implied and some spoken, he wrote. That starts to then make it a little more clear to me. Divine law, written down in the scroll that she holds in her lap. That would be the spoken and the definite, wouldn't it? But between those words, between the lines that are written down, might be what's implied. And most definitely, there is what is experienced of God, what is experienced of mystery and greater truth. Some notes I have from other tarot writers refer to it as a record of nature's memory. Well, I don't know what to think about that, but I've kept it in my notes because I'm fascinated with the concept of nature holding memory. Memory is an important aspect of the High Priestess. Balance includes a consideration of all times, past, present, and future. Remember the power of the crown of Isis, and the color blue is the quiet place we go to remember. There are some that write that her half-hidden, the covering over the scroll, is to keep the information from those who don't approach with proper reverence. Well, that's kind of a glass half empty, glass half full kind of thing, don't you think? Well, in my theory, I approach her because I find her very approachable, knowing that she will make eye contact with me and probably smile. Well, maybe a Mona Lisa smile. She's not a giggle out loud kind of girl, but she's going to encourage me to become one with her. To me, it's more about that she's showing half of it to let you know that it's there rather than hiding half of it. I do like a reference that I saw that's the record of one's life, the record of all lives. That seems to be a powerful aspect of memory and what that might be. In his tarot and the journey of the hero, Hans Banzhof referred to the scroll as the wisdom of the womb. I really relate to that. Maybe I especially relate to it as a woman because of where she's holding it. I can feel wisdom held there. I can personally really truly feel it. Where it sits then becomes very important to me when it comes to the symbolism of this card and that scroll. He wrote specifically, in light of where it's placed and the power of its wisdom, insight, deep knowledge, and unity, and what becomes of that, the cauldron of wisdom. The High Priestess is Mary. Mary remembered all things and thought deeply about them. Gotta tell you the truth, when it comes to this card, my symbols start from her crown and her connection to the moon, move down to her face. I know that if I stood before her, she would make beautiful eye contact with me. They move to that solar cross which connects her to the magician and to the Empress. They move to the place of her womb wisdom and my womb wisdom, the cauldron of insight and deep knowing. And then they move down to her feet, where her robe turns to water and flows away. And that energy to me is wisdom received, wisdom considered at the heart level, taken into the depths of the womb and stillness and silence, and then passed down, moving away from her, passing down, passing forward. Again, it's the energy of that conduit that she is from moon to water to earth. Where that water flows from the hem of her gown, we find a connection to the lunar crescent. Crescent moon, again a connection to Isis, one of her symbols. The moon as the hidden cycles of life. What's happening that we cannot see, that which is not illuminated at the moment, but it not being illuminated makes it no less present. The crescent moon, the lunar crescent, is a symbol of emotions, inner peace, especially manifesting in a sense of surety and steadfastness, and a feeling of union with everything else, a connection with everything. Again, it's the power of the unconscious. It's the capacity for intimacy. Now, that one made me stop and think, because the card's not about reaching out to others, but this part of the card, she's leaving, and she's moving, and she's reaching out and into the world, and what if what she's offering is everything of her stillness and her balance, and that lunar blue flow of spirit that moves through her and out into the world. Suddenly intimacy makes sense for me. Other symbolism for the lunar crescent is a clarity of mind, of heart, and of spirit. Well, certainly that comes from that place of peace and quiet. You're going to see often quoted when it comes to the lunar crescent. It's under her foot, showing dominion over all the powers of the moon. That word dominion, it's an awkward one. Oh, she doesn't look like the kind of being to me that wields a heavy influence, a forceful influence over something. And in fact, if you look at the card, there's nothing about the way Pixie drew it that makes it feel like She stamped her foot down on that crescent and is holding it. In fact, her waters, her very being, are flowing smoothly over it. So perhaps, instead of showing dominion over the powers of the moon, she's coming to understand them. And she's carrying that wisdom forth, out and into the world. So I might pick a bone with this word dominion over the moon, because dominion shows up in a lot of sources that talk about her relationship to the lunar crescent at her feet. So I searched for a meaning of dominion that made it comfortable for me whenever I would see it in descriptions, because I started seeing it so often. Some places there were even descriptions of the card that didn't mention anything about the card except dominion over the moon. I relate to it now with one of the definitions of dominion: your scope of authority, your scope of knowledge. It then becomes that midpoint in the equal armed cross, the place that everything comes from, the place that everything returns to, the place that you know something so well. To me, the power of it here with the High Priestess is she's willing to share that. The water flows gently over that moon and then moves onward. So to me, it wasn't about dominancy. It became about understanding that she has nothing to prove. She has been with, completely immersed in those waters, has a complete understanding of herself within that. She's literally, in a sense, in control of that. The vessel, the channel, the conduit. And as I mentioned to you, as I leave that card, what's important to me is she lets it flow from her. We're reminded again, like the cubic stone reminds us, it's there for us all if we come to our own place of dominion. In the end, I relate to that concept of dominion at a very contemporary level. One of the definitions of the word dominion is ownership. Ownership. How often when we look to attain something, especially if we're celebrating that we've gotten there, we say, I own that. That means we get it. We understand it. There's a complete relationship to it. That is what the power of dominion is for me with this card. In fact, it has become one of my more powerful word associations with the card. I was challenged by it. I was made to feel uncomfortable by it. I lived with it. I explored it. And I came to understand the power of dominion within any of us, to have a kingdom or a queendom that we understand so completely, have absolute mastery over. And then the release of that, the ability, because the High Priestess teaches us of the lack of ego and pride, to let it go. Let it go forward and let it be available to any who are seeking it. But with the reminder, she sits on that philosopher's stone only if we are worthy. I'd be interested in your thoughts on this. The presence of that hint of the cubic stone and that oft-repeated phrase that she has dominion over the moon obviously led me to explore this card in a way I would never have if I just looked at the imagery and not known some of the history about it. I'd like to know if any of your considerations of the symbolism of this card touched on these things and what your conclusions were. Because what I've shared here is very much a sense of my conclusions, not necessarily the facts as presented when it comes to these symbols on this card. Literally, my presentation of this is my letting go, my offering out there what it was to me in the wholeness that I experienced it. So I'd be particularly interested in where it feels differently to you. Here, of course, in our comments below, or in our Tarot Together Facebook group. Merry part.